Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this week's podcast. Today, we're here with Duran, CEO and founder of Yomez, and we'll be spending a little time today just getting to know him a little better. So, hey, Duran.
Hi, how you doing, Vic? Good
I'm
morning.
good. Thank you. Good morning. I'm really excited to spend some time asking you a couple questions. I think this is a great opportunity for those who are joining the Yomez community to get to know the man behind the product and what inspired all of this great work. So thanks for sitting down to answer our questions.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. How about you give us a little introduction on yourself? Let us know kind of where you're from, where you went to school, and how your professional journey kind of brought you to where you are today.
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. And I'm actually originally from Israel. So I was born there and grew up there for a little while. And then my family came to the United States and we settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And that's where I grew up. And I have one brother, which is always a fun journey. And then I went to school in Pittsburgh as well. I went to Carnegie Mellon University. And it's kind of a quick funny thing because my brother is older and he was kind of doing the same kind of things like engineering basically. And I saw what he was doing. I instantly knew that's what I wanted to do. So picking my major was easier than most, I think. So I learned and I got my degree and then I went to work for Dell Computer Corporation in Austin, Texas, which was a really cool kind of journey. So all the way from Pittsburgh to Austin, quite different. I got to meet Michael Dell, which was pretty neat, considering everything he's accomplished. Started my own little software company at the time and worked at many other software companies. Several startups and so forth, eventually finding my way to Boston. I settled down in Boston, been here for the past 20 years. Met my wife here, 2 kids, a dog, the usual story. It's kind of funny. It's very domestic. We joke around about domestic things all the time. I share with you these domestic things, but they're, it's
Love
fun.
the
It's part of it.
stories. They're always the best. It always gives us insight into your life and who you are.
Right. We're normal people. We put our, somebody says, put our pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. Um, yeah, my journey brought me to Boston, and my last job, I was CTO of an ad tech company for about 5 years, which has been a really great experience. And during that time, as a CTO, you have a lot of responsibilities. You're responsible not only for, the technical stuff, but also for recruiting and for business strategy and, lots of stuff. And I found it very difficult to stay on top of everything that I wanted to accomplish until one day I decided to just put it on my calendar. I said, like, how about like this afternoon, I'm going to do this. And then I found myself actually following this plan. And it made it so much easier for me to actually get stuff done. And later on, I learned that's, making time to do things. And then I learned what that was called. It was called time blocking, which is basically blocking time on your calendar to do things. And, it helps because, folks know that you're actually doing things and you can't, come to meetings and, too many meetings, you can't actually get anything done. So I did this for a while and I noticed lots of other folks in the company were having the same problem. They were having problems kind of staying on top of things, especially, people in the management area, the executives like the CEO and the founder and so forth. Everybody had so many things to do. And so it was so hard to stay on top of it. So I was time blocking. It was getting really tedious because, with Google Calendar, you have to move all these little blocks around. And then, things change. So somebody would invite me to a meeting and I would have to move all these little blocks around. It was just getting really tedious. And I thought you could just do this, much more easily. So I decided to start working on it. And at some point, I just need to focus on it more. So I started Yomez, and that's kind of where we are. And the goal was to make this thing much easier, but the bigger picture was to help people be effective. Going through all my experiences over the last many years, I've learned that it's challenging to figure out what your goals are, challenging to be proactive and to take responsibility for things. It's challenging to manage, putting the most important things first, and lots of other things like that. And all those things, it took me a long time to learn, and I would love to, help others by teaching a lot of this stuff, and making, time management much easier with Yomez.
That's awesome. I mean, what an impressive like background, just from even from like academia into your professional life. That's amazing. And to hear too that like the kind of the birth of Yomez just came from you recognizing and identifying an issue that was just prevalent in your life, right? You were struggling to stay on top of all of the different roles and all of the different obligations that you had to kind of fill. You saw this need and you came to answer it. You were like, let's make this into a solution that can help people do what they set out to do, accomplish what they set out to accomplish. So that's awesome. It's great to see kind of the trajectory and how that story has unfolded and brought you to where you are today.
Yeah.
So along those lines, so you mentioned like goals and accomplishing, staying on top of responsibilities. Yomez, from my own use of it, it really does help people achieve balance between work and life. And you've mentioned, you were CTO and you had all of these different like hats, so to say, that you had to wear throughout the day. Now you've come to found Yomez. What practices do you implement in your own personal life that help you create balance within work so that you're able to kind of fulfill these different responsibilities, and then balance between work and your personal life?
Right. That's a great question, Vic. Thanks. I learned more and more over the last few years that balance is, for lack of a better word, really necessary. If it's not there, things just don't work. And I'll give you a very simple example before I get into a few of the details. We know that, lots of people love to work and accomplish things. And we'd love to maybe do that 24 hours a day, but it's just not possible because we have to sleep, we have to rest. So we have to balance between work and resting, because if we don't, then, we're not healthy enough to actually do the work. So you have to balance. There is no other way. So likewise, balancing for me is really important between work and personal life, because of the same reason. So I can work all the time, but jobs come and go and so forth. And when the jobs are over, if I don't balance, there's nothing there besides just work. So for me, family is important. Having time for myself is important. And the way I generally do this is I block time to do these things, which is kind of, I know, shocker, right? Whoa, whoa. So I find that very useful. And especially with, these days with the pandemic, we really have to enforce our own schedules, because they're not kind of built for us anymore. So for me, I spend the mornings kind of like with my family and my kids. They wake up, we do breakfast together. We talk about what's coming in our day. So that's kind of my morning routine. And then I go into work time. And work time for me is generally, 9 to 5, plus or minus here and there, depending on what things are going on. And during work time, I work. And so when my family, comes down and says, like, Daddy, I need you for something, unless it's urgent, I say, well, let's do this after work. Can it wait? And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. So you got to set those boundaries and you got to stick to that, time allocation. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Um, and then for me after work, we have dinner as a family, and I help cook, and then we get into kind of our night routine where I spend some time with my kids and I love playing Uno with my daughter these days. We have a really good time with that. We compete, and last night yeah, I know, right? And to make it a little more interesting, last night we wagered some chores. Um, as,
Gamifying chores.
exactly, as stakes. It's a little bit of gambling, I know, but I think it teaches good values because it was like, oh, bring up the laundry. If whoever loses brings up the laundry, and it turned out that both of us won one game, so we both kind of did the task. So it shows, I think fairness. It shows that there's something at stake, even though it's kind of a fun thing. And it makes the game more interesting too, obviously, when there's something kind of at stake and there's a little bit of a score. um, so that's generally how I try to balance things, is by blocking time for doing those things and sticking to that.
That's great. You mentioned, I loved hearing about kind of your morning and your like nightly routine with like your family. I think it's always great to kind of get inside look into how, you know, different people who are successful and who are taking on, big endeavors, starting a company, building an app, bringing solutions to people. It's always great to hear how they split up their personal time and what they do with it. So it's great to hear how, for you, ensuring that you're dedicating time to being with your family, is definitely a high priority for you. And kind of having that mental image of a CEO going and cooking with his family and making sure everyone's fed, that's lovely. And I'm curious to know, is there like a dish that you are particularly good at preparing, or a favorite that you have?
Uh, that's a funny question. Yeah, it's a very good question. So one of the things I discovered a while ago was this thing called banana pancake, which is basically it's just a squished up banana and a couple eggs, and you fry it like an omelet. And I made this thing for my son, who's a little bit of a picky eater. And it turns out that it was a big hit. He loves it. So every morning, I'm in the kitchen and my son wakes up, and I know the first words from his mouth will be, uh,
Banana pancake.
yes, Daddy, can you make me a banana pancake? So not good morning, not hello, Daddy, can you make me a banana pancake? So I say, good morning.
Awesome. Instant hit.
Yeah, it's a great, it's a very simple thing. It's great. And I actually learned it from one of my coworkers a few years ago. So yeah,
Awesome. We'll have to try it out in our house.
yeah, it's cool. It's really nice.
So this isn't like anything new, but I feel like people are suffering from this increasingly through this period of quarantine and this pandemic that we're facing. And that is burnout. People are, there's like no real division between, like, kind of how you mentioned, right? Like between work and personal life, because you're working in your personal space. And I think for a lot of people it's really difficult to create those boundaries, like you mentioned, to
Right.
we're working while we're at home. So it's easy to kind of say, all right, I'm going to work from 9 to 9 p.m,
Right.
even if you don't intentionally mean to do so. So my question for you is, do you, when burnout comes up, which inevitably it does for anyone at any different point in
Of
life,
course. Yeah.
um, do you have any like personal practices that you implement to kind of alleviate burnout and try to like reset and rejuvenate?
It's a great question. I've been there, Vic. I'm sure, you have, and most people have, where you work so hard, you get to the point where you're like, I just can't do anymore. And I want to just take off and, get out of here. Um, and yeah, I think, I never understood exactly why I did this until recently, but I used to always, when working, emphasize, rest time. I would have people on my team who would work like crazy hours, and literally we would say, I'm sorry, but I think you really need to take a day off. And they would say, no, 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 I want to work. I'm like, no, really, come on. I can't force you, but it's really important, because we know that you need to rest, just like we talked before. So what I learned in the end is that you need that balance. You need to balance, the production, which is the work that you do, and your ability to produce. And if you don't rest, and if you don't take care of yourself, and if you're not healthy, you cannot produce. So it's just a fact. So these days, when I feel burnout, I remember that, and I remember that it's okay to take a break. It's actually necessary in order for me to be able to be productive. So that's how I kind of deal with it these days.
Oh, that's great. That makes sense. I think, for a lot of people, myself included, sometimes even like scheduling in advance, like, a week from today, I'm taking one day off at
Yep.
the end of this long project, after the end of a sprint, whatever it may be, just actually scheduling that time down, and remembering and like giving myself permission to say, all right, it's time to shut off for a little bit, disconnect, and take care of myself. So it's
Right.
pretty solid advice, Ron. Thank you.
Sure. It's so critical.
So critical.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like that is a lesson that you've like learned throughout your career. Like, burnout is 100% real. You've got to take time to rest and reset.
You have to.
Are there any other like interesting like things that you've learned throughout your career, like, or even like in your personal like lessons that you can apply that have kind of helped or guided you, as you've grown as an individual and as a professional?
I think so. I mean, I have lots of lessons. I'll cover like just two real quick.
Okay.
One is always treat people with respect and kindness, no matter what. I've always thought that way. I always cared about everybody that I worked with, and people that worked for me. And because I think I truly do care, and I want them to be happy, and I want them to grow and learn. And being kind and caring for other people, is really important to me. And I think it comes out in really good teams that I've worked with, and people in general. I think that's really important. So that's number one. I was blown away, actually, by the way, when I was in an elevator with the CEO of this like high, big company, and he was all this, I could imagine this powerful man. And then he held the door open for me when we were going through a hallway or whatever. And I thought that was so amazing that this big high powered CEO took a minute to like be kind and be like a normal down to earth person. So that was really cool. So that's number one. Number two, which is really important, and my coworkers will always remind me of this, is I would always tell them, so what's the root cause? Why is something happening? Why is something broken? What is occurring here? And later on, I found out this is a generic principle, but because you always want to diagnose, you want to find out why is something happening, or why is something not working before you try to solve that problem. And this rule is so important because we often like tend to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
We try to guess, and we try to, we're like, oh, I think I know why. And we randomly try things, and it just doesn't work. So unless you know why something is broken, or, there's a problem, if you don't figure that out first, solutions that you come up with will never really be successful. So I see this theme over and over again, in the whole world too. But it's such an important thing.
Yeah, that's like first of all, those are two really great lessons. And, just to kind of echo what you were saying with regard to respect. And, I've seen it myself working with you, like, and with the solution, the way that you pour yourself into finding ways to improve Yomez, and the messaging behind, really caring about helping people achieve work-life balance, and not just work-life balance, but like help them achieve what they set out to. So like that's 100% visible. And in the way that, you and I have collaborated together as well, like, it's definitely there, that lesson and that regard for respect. But also with, the principle that you were mentioning with regard to diagnosing a problem, right? Like it's such a great lesson, because it's something that you can apply to, like you said, like just about anything. You, like, if you're an engineer and something's broken, let's diagnose why this isn't working. In life, in relationships, like why are my friend and I not communicating? Why are my friend and my partner not communicating well? Or what's going on? And then even as a marketer myself, like, why aren't we getting leads? Why
Right.
aren't we, why isn't this working? So it's like you said, it's like, kind of like it's this principle that can be applied to just about everything. And I guess it's easy to kind of forget, these principles, but that's definitely one that should, remain top of mind for just about anyone.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's so easy to just to forget it. But, I think the key is when you get into that situation is to say, wait a minute, I think I should diagnose before I try to guess here.
100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're here, we're talking about your professional journey, where you are right now. You're working on this app, you've created this incredible app, which really helps people with time management, right? So
Yeah.
thinking about time, it always feels like we never have enough of it. So, if we had an extra 10 hours in the day, what would you do more of with those 10 hours?
Wow, that's such a hard question because time is so limited. We have a limited amount of time to spend, and the biggest challenge has been so far is how to spend that time. So I think I wouldn't really change much. I would, time block a little bit more for work and family and so forth. I think that's all I would do. I would keep the same balance, but I would just allocate a little bit more time in each of those areas. That's I think my current view of that situation. I think in the past, when I was working at a different job and I wanted to do, for example, Yomez, I would say, well, I would just work on Yomez, right? But these days, I've learned I have the balance that I'm happy with, and so I learned that I choose, what I want to do with my time, and so I have chosen what to do with my time. Uh, Whether it's 2 hours or 4 hours on something, I still choose to spend time on the things that are meaningful to me. So
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it. Like, I personally struggle with this where sometimes like I get into a mode where I'm like, I'm just gonna do this one thing for the next 8 hours. And that has like its benefits,
yeah,
but largely then I realize, oh darn, like I have to do all this other stuff and I've just been, tunnel vision on this one thing. And, if I were to liken this to like, you know, eating, because it's one of my favorite things to do,
sure.
it sounds like you would have an appetizer, an entree, and dessert, where I would probably just go straight for the dessert. But, there's something to what you're saying. Like if you keep that balance, even if you had more time in the day, you're able to do kind of carve away and chip away a little bit at various things as opposed to just like filling up on one. So, uh, sounds like I'll be rethinking my approach to the way I tackle my work.
Yeah, don't take it too kind of like, nothing's perfect, right? It's like I generally try to keep that kind of balance, but just like you, I get into like a certain problem that I get, really interested and I want to get it done, or a project, and I would spend more time on that. And that's okay. I think one of the biggest things that we learned, or I've learned, is to forgive yourself. Like you don't take this stuff a little too seriously. Sometimes we have best intentions of balancing, and we'll focus on one thing, ignore other things. It's okay. The next day, just try to get back on course. It's like there's an analogy that says like an airplane is never on course. It's always adjusting. There's little adjustments, and eventually
Yeah,
you get to where you're going. And I think it's really true with productivity as well. So
this is some really wise words there. Thank you. So Yomez is a growing startup, and as CEO and founder, what do you believe are the most important leadership qualities? And you've kind of given us a little bit of an inside look into like the type of environment and culture that you'd like to foster, but
yeah.
I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Sure. I think leadership is about the vision. It's about the goals. It's like where you want to go. Um, where management is more about just like how you execute to that.
Mhm.
So I think leadership qualities is to, look out there and see what people are experiencing,
Mhm.
to see what they're struggling with, and to try to come up with solutions to help them. I've been listening to the folks that are using Yomez, and we often have conversations about, how they're using the software, and everybody's using it actually in radical ways that I never imagined. So I think, listening and seeing how people are using the software, and how, what their challenges are, is immensely helpful, to figuring out where to go. And a lot of times people actually don't know what they want. They just know, the stuff that they're struggling with. So trying to connect those two things together, I think, is a really good leadership, quality in order to figure out where you want to go.
Yeah, that's definitely that definitely resonates.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what you want. You just kind of know somewhat of the direction that you're trying to head to. So, and speaking of direction, um, you know, we've talked a lot about like lessons and things that we've learned. What do you think is like the biggest challenge you've faced um, with your Yoma's journey so far, and maybe the biggest lesson you've learned through this specific journey?
It's a very good question. I think the biggest challenge is not knowing the future,
Mm,
and the anxiety that comes with it. And I
yeah.
think it's such a human condition. We've talked and we've written about anxiety and what that's all about. And we know that, basically anxiety is driven by, thoughts that you have, worry thoughts. And it's a mechanism to keep you safe. So, in the old days was about the, the line in the woods, and you're like, oh, whoa, that's a problem. And then you get this fight or flight kind of situation. That's the anxiety, right? That's the feeling. It's the adrenaline in your body getting you ready to either, run away or fight. That's what anxiety is. And by design, we avoid it, in order to keep ourselves safe. We'll avoid the lion, right? We want that feeling to go down. So we don't know the future. We never will, but we're anxious about it. And so it's normal part of the journey of starting a company is like, you don't know what's going to happen. And that naturally, those thoughts, cause anxiety. And to recognize what that is, and to say, that's not a line in the woods, it's okay. And to get through that, and do it anyway. That's the key, is to, things that are, unpleasant because of the anxiety, to get through those and do it anyway. And that's, I think, the big difference I'm learning, between being effective and not effective, is that, like, effective people, don't want to do certain things, like, write a blog article every week, in order to keep, or an email saying hi to everybody and what's going on. It's, a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to focus on, playing with the toys or whatever, or building product. But that's important. It's necessary. So you got to do it anyway. So that's the difference.
And that's awesome. That's some, really it's a quite the way to wrap up today's podcast. I mean, I think we've come away with some really wise and insightful words. Frankly, I feel like I'm gonna sit down and like meditate on everything.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's a really great point, right? There's so many things throughout our lives that um, causes anxiety, causes fear, and perhaps are preventing us from being the reaching our actual potential,
Exactly.
actualizing our potential. And sometimes the line isn't even a line at all. Sometimes it's just like a little kitten, and we're just perceive it to be a lion. So that's
Wise
yeah,
words.
that's really helpful perspective. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's
But
always a change.
yeah, Daron, that actually concludes
All
today's
right.
podcast. So thank you so much for sharing with us your journey, some of your personal insights and your wisdom. This is a really great call. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vic. I really enjoy, speaking with you, and, this has been fun. Thanks.
That's it, guys. Thanks again.